Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week I'm back on chassis building and design development. See you in a minute. Now, the majority of cycle carts are based on cars which were probably, usually two-seaters. And because I'm working on something that was a single seat racer, I am struggling with width, and I am a little bit paranoid about the ability to get in and out. I've built about 3 mock-ups so far. The chassis is now starting to be built, and this week I'm actually starting to put floors in, establish bulkhead positions, and yet again still mither at this problem of the access and getting in and out of it. It means that the rear bulkhead is pretty much critical to whether I can get in and out, and I need to basically start at the front of the cart, work my way backwards to get that scuttle position that will then give me the width of the cockpit itself, or the depth of the cockpit from front to back. So this week my wife is in hospital for a fairly major operation. Because of COVID I can't go and visit, so I'm stuck on my own for 2 or 3 days. So I thought I'd take advantage when she wasn't around and move the thing into the conservatory, where I can quietly cut and saw away at wood and metal without her knowing, hopefully get it cleaned up before she gets back, and get on with some of this design development, so that I can at least rest easy that I'm going to be able to get in and out of this thing when it's done. So we'll go in and have a look and see what's happening in the conservatory. got the first two bulkhead positions, one more or less at where the steering rods go across, and one which is just in front of the scuttle. Those positions are governed by significant points on the body. That is where the nose cone ends and the bonnet begins, so I'm going to have to put some sort of a bulkhead up that will match up against the nose cone, and that again is where the bonnet ends and the scuttle begins. So we'll have positions there where we can put up a vertical former and put the hoops in ready to make the body. Again, still not quite sure on how that will be built yet, but at least the positions are right. I'm just going to cut the floor down now to fit in that and thin the thickness of the plywood down slightly, and once that's in I can then start and concentrate on where that rear bulkhead is going to go by working backwards from the dummy scuttle, which will sit at a position somewhere around there, and I can establish how much room I need to get in and out before we actually put the rear bulkhead temporarily in position. That'll go in like that as a temporary fix, and I can make sure it's all comfortable, and that will then set everything from there forwards can then be set in stone, and I can start and work on the drivetrain and how that's going to work. Just setting the height of the router cutter to be the height that I need to get that clearance, and what I'm going to do then is move the fence across so that it will just leave the very smallest amount of blade protruding, and that will just give me a cut then of millimetre or less, and I can run that through either side and get the piece narrowed down, and then once all that's finished it'll allow me to get a little bit of finish on the floor. I think I'll probably give it a coat of epoxy or something like that, just to weatherproof it all. Whether or not I'll end up putting some aluminium on the inside, because all the footwear will give it a certain amount of scuffing up even if it's covered in epoxy, but I can worry about that later. The important thing at the moment is to get the thing itself fitting, so we'll just try that and see what happens. Now I've got the chassis rails and cross members and floor pretty much fettled to where I want them now. I've reached a point where I'm sort of stupid amounts that I'm worrying about, like 5mm too wide at the back and things like that, which is perhaps a little bit stupid. So what I want to do today, the aim of today, is to get the body mock-up done. I'm going to take the Mark 1, 2 and 3 mock-ups that I've been working with and apply them to the chassis to get this final rear bulkhead position. I've got the cross pieces which I need to secure. I've got a smaller one to do at the front, and that will help me get an idea of where I am with width for feet and pedals and distances and things. I've got the back position, the backrest. Can get the height right on that one and get it to the position that I hope it will be at, but then it'll tell me whether I need to move it back or not. The thing I've got to alter really is the sides. I've had sides before on the mock-ups which we have. What I need to do is cut them down so they sit on top of the frame rail, and also these represent the height in the middle. What I want to do today is to take these down to where they are vertical sides, if you like, and then I can apply the hoop on top, because again it's not giving me quite the representation I want. So hopefully at the end of the day I'll end up with a plywood and I don't know what, probably cardboard or even thick paper, I don't know, full representation of the main body shape, and then I can start and sort out these pinch points of the cockpit to set this back bulkhead level. So we'll get on cutting these down so that they represent vertical side pieces. I might just use them in the groove, in the top groove, and accept the fact that it's probably 10 or 15mm too narrow, because that's not likely to be a big problem, but it does mean it'll help locate it all better. Back, there's a piece to put over the top which comes from there to there as a rounded section, because the dashboard is set back a bit. It comes out on a pair of formers from the main support rail there backwards, but it should give me some room underneath, I'm hoping. So I need to find something now that I can just put over the top but the acid test really, I suppose, is whether or not that will get me in or not. And it does look like with a lot of fuss and bother I can, but as I said before, it is very snug, to say the least. I'll try to think about this and see whether or not to just stick that extra inch or two in the cockpit, because bearing in mind there's a steering wheel or a steering rod arm shaft, whatever you call it, got to go through the middle of this. So I think I'm going to struggle with that. So yeah, I think it's time to stretch the wheelbase by a couple of inches. Right, that's put 2 inches back into the cockpit length. And I've also thought of one other little wheeze if I struggle with this. Still tight, obviously, but that's much better. Yeah, much easier to get into. Whether it'll be as easy to get out, I don't know. But I did think there's one other option, and that is I could lower the floor in this area. I've still got a little bit of room underneath the cart to go down, so it's possible that we could just drop the floor and give me that little bit more room. But with a pair of decent hand grips on here, yeah, that should be a much more straightforward way of getting in or out. So 2 inches in the length it will be. We'll drop the rear wheels back a bit and just make that cockpit slightly longer, and hopefully no one will notice. Right, it doesn't look much like an Austin 7 racer, but it gives me that space over the front end that I hadn't had any concept of before. I've moved this back. It's actually 4 inches back, but it hasn't desperately affected where the bulkhead was originally, so I'm assuming there was quite a bit of upholstery to come into that equation. And I'm just going to try that. It's tight, but I think it's doable now. So the biggest risk will be the steering column itself. I've had to move the battery from where I wanted to put it because that was causing a certain amount of grief. But I think I'm happy enough that if I just move that rear axle back a couple of inches, it gives me the confidence that again, when I start the body, I'll do the same thing with it properly. I'm thinking ash, I don't know, it might be maple framing, but we'll start at the front, work our way up to this bulkhead and the place where the steering column and dashboard line comes in down here.
and then worry about the other bits. Bearing in mind there's a cutout to come in here to give a little bit more room, and this side will have a folding down door, which is helpful as well. But on the whole, I think that's been instructive. Got a headrest that actually works in terms of height at the moment, and I haven't lowered the seat at all. So I'm hoping it will be fairly low down. This is set for, at the moment, about 4 inches of ground clearance, which I could always lower a bit, but I think that's probably going to be enough. And as I say, having this cowl coming up and over, but with the dashboard set back, just gives me that little bit more room for the knees when I come in and out. So a very useful day. Got some really good sort of settling down things, nailing down positions and things. We've got the floors all cut. I've got some of the cross members cut. I can now start on this back cross member, and that was what was really the whole point of the exercise, really, to establish where the rear cross member went in relation to the seat, because that is fundamental to where the motor will hang from and how that will be placed as well. So I'm going to take all this to pieces now, roll it all up, clean the conservatory and put it all away for a bit and have a think about what we've got. There's certainly not a lot of width in it for pedals, that's certainly for sure, but we will worry about that when the time comes. There's enough room for my feet in slippers, so I've got some racing shoes that are very narrow from the trike, which is also narrow anyway. Right, so I think that's as far as I can get with it at the moment. I'm still got reservations about how this is going to go, but I think we're okay. Width is something that's becoming increasingly of concern, because it's now becoming apparent that there isn't a great deal of foot width in it. But this is very similar to the trike that I've got, which has got very little room in for feet as well. So we should be able to get around that. But now we've got to go back and tidy up the conservatory and get that cleaned up before my wife gets back home. What that means also is that we're going to have a hiatus of probably 6, 7, 8 weeks in the build on the Cyclekart, because she's going to be convalescing and I'm not going to be able to be spending time out in the conservatory or the garage or the shed, really. I'm going to be running around, hopefully doing all the bits and pieces that she normally does, as well as looking after her. That doesn't mean that the videos will stop, because these things are hopefully coming out probably 6 months or more ahead of or behind when I actually did the work. But it does mean that work will stop on the Cyclekart for a bit, and that time will be spent thinking about things. So you may well find when I come back in what will be 2 or 3 weeks time in your time, but in my time will probably be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks later, I will have changed it yet again. So we'll see where we go in a week or two's time. Hope it was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be doing something different on the Cyclekart. I'll see you then. Bye.